Oh, very, very good morning, everyone. Very warm welcome. This is our second session on the paramita of forbearance. And so, warm welcome to those of you here live, and as much as Zoom can be live, and to those joining us later on YouTube. Then, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. So let's start with our usual excellent motivation. It's standard, it's usual. Let's make it unique and wonderful. A really I usually share my funny memories when they come up. When I was being diagnosed for blood pressure about 15 years ago, they put a thing called a halter on you, where you've got 24 hours and it takes your pressure every 20 minutes in the day. So you're going about your daily business, and all of a sudden, this pressure pad on your arm fills up. And on that day, I had to drive to Aix-en-Provence on the motorway, and I had to do an emergency stop. There was an accident in front, and everyone, screeching, and the brakes go off to the side. So just as the thing was puffing up, so when I went the next day to the cardiologist and he saw the graph, he said, "What on earth happened there?" So let's do an emergency stop of samsara and your busy thoughts and your busy mind and all the things that make the mind be caught up in daily life. When we think with great love and great compassion of all the suffering and of our wonderful, precious human existence which we have right now, right here, today. When we do serious meditation practice, we start by saying, on this day, during this session, in this moment, on this cushion, may I attain enlightenment for all beings. So we do our very, very best to turn our hearts in loving care to all beings, very especially to those with whom we have a karmic connection, our parents, our family, our lovers, friends, and enemies. And we include everyone in the greatest love we can possibly manage, and with a great joy of having found the Dharma and being able to practice and apply the Dharma to our lives. Thank you. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on, until we reach the very heart of enlightenment, through the practice of generosity and all six transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends, find respect, live in places of peace and plenty. Most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these things to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating the causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering. May they attain the great equanimity, free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamavati shameta shadro Om Kuri Mara Jite Karota Keyore Teljo Wati Oloyane Bishuda Nimale Malapana Ye Kukure Kaka Grase Grasana Om Muki Paramukya Muki Shamadawane Sawa Graha Bandanane Nigri Hitva Sava Bhava Pravadina Vimukta Marapasha Savitva Buddha Mudra Anudgatita Sava Mare Butsarita Pare Shuddhe Biga Shantu Sava Marakama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. Thank you. So in the previous session, we considered some generalities about forbearance, and it was kind of a general introduction to the subject. Today we'll plunge into the details in a very formal, structured way, according to the teachings of our great lineage forefather Khenpoken. So the first, the term forbearance. I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced. I don't know if anyone's sure how it was pronounced at the time of Buddha, because like Hebrew, Sanskrit died for a while in use. Spoken. And so I think that happened to Hebrew. So it looks like Santi, Ksanti, is the Sanskrit, and then in Tibetan it's Zerpa. And as we saw last time, I say forbearance. Many people say patience. Just a few weeks ago, Taisitupa was giving a talk, and he said patience, tolerance, and then he added a note. He said, and I know forbearance, and he said it's too. What did he say? It's too sophisticated for me, which means that not the term is too sophisticated, but that he's not sure enough about the etymology and all the resonances in the English language. So better to stick with what lots of people say, which is patience. And as I said last time, for me, patience often gives the feeling of you're able to wait. This is part of it. For instance, when we look especially at the second aspect of forbearance, about the actual nature of suffering, in particular, the sufferings we voluntarily undertake to follow a Buddhist path, then knowing that it will take long, understanding that results may or may not appear, and we just don't know. So there, the aspect of patience in the English sense, where you say, be patient. And if somebody goes to see a teacher and they say, well, I've been meditating for 3 days now and I've still not got any enlightenment, be patient. And there was a very, very funny little drawing cut out of a newspaper, it's a cartoon, on Samiling notice board in the 1980s, I think it was. There was a little line drawing of a Zen, I suppose a Zen master, and a load of wild-looking, 5 or 6 or 7 students, not monks, not shaven heads, and the Zen master is saying, the road to enlightenment is long. This is why I ask you to bring blanket and sandwiches. So, it's quite funny. And so we need patience in that sense. We need to know that some things take time, and especially sometimes, or some of us are more impatient in that sense. We want to push ahead, and it's frustrating that things don't happen. So sometimes patience is part of it. Tolerance is a very much too limited a term, because and then, it's okay. But for me, forbearance, when we look in the actual etymology of zerpa and santi, it means an ability to carry. So a load that's too much for somebody else, a strong person can just pick up and carry. That idea, you can manage, you can cope, you can carry this. It's okay. So forbearance is the word that I'm sticking with in this course. So then, having said the term, and when we look in a few weeks' time at all 6 paramitas, we'll look at the etymology of all 6 names, and we'll see it means an ability to bear. People say, I can't bear it. I can't bear it anymore. So next we come to our definition. And so there it says, so in Khenpoken's teachings, when he teaches all 6 paramitas, he doesn't say the definition, he says the essential character, the essence, the real character of forbearance is that you are undisturbed by anything. And this is the point I was developing at length in the first session. You are undisturbed, unperturbed by anything. So very even, very smooth, and that's the words. That's the words. So in very good teachers, like Akon Rinpoche, for instance, he was such a wonderful example of this all day long, every day. And he never freaked out. He never, and his whole presence was very smooth, and I meant to find in my computer something he said, but maybe next time. So anyway, that's the definition, to be undisturbed by anything. Disturbed means disturbed. It doesn't mean you're not moved. So I think Akon Rinpoche was a good example for this. He could be very moved by situations, by suffering, by the beauty of something, and but then he wasn't disturbed. We'll look when we get further into forbearance, which is all to do with shunyata and being able to bear the experience of shunyata. We can see this gives a background, default nature, a strength, so that you can be, you can laugh. Doesn't mean you have to be serious, super smooth, Buddhist all the time. You can laugh. 16th Karmapa's laughter was amazing. Amazing. It just filled wherever we were, the whole building would rock with his laughter. So beautiful laughter. It was like beautiful church bells or something, so lovely. And it was sincere. But at the same time, his laughter never made his mind leave that rock solid base of enlightened nature. Same with Akon Rinpoche. So you can be moved, but not disturbed. I think that's an interesting point for you to reflect upon. What's the difference? And so there's one text from Vasubandhu called Bodhisattva Levels, and there Vasubandhu says, it is not to be agitated by anything whatsoever, because your mind dwells solely in compassion, and your mind is free of materialism. Here, materialism means self-interest. He carries on succinctly, the essential nature of a bodhisattva's forbearance should be known as this. And one point I wanted to make last time, I can't quite remember everything I said, but the whole reason that we will be learning to face, deal skillfully with what before upset us, is because we want to leave this life with this mind that we just defined. A strength, a mind that you can take anywhere, and it's not going to be upset, disturbed. So then, next point, third point in Gampopa's exposition, is that what are the key aspects? 3 different aspects. In all 6 paramita, we have 3 key aspects for each. So the first one is forbearance as remaining unperturbed. We've just seen that's the definition. By harm inflicted by others. When we explore the details today, we'll see we're looking actually at an aggressor, someone who is acting aggressively towards you. But that teaches us what our reactions should be, and then it extends to any other, not necessarily other people, but life, the weather, circumstances, what's going on in your whatever, not just people stuff, but anything. So the first one is forbearance as learning to remain undisturbed when there is harm inflicted by others. The second one is forbearance as coping with suffering. So the suffering may not be inflicted by others. It could be coming from our own body, ill health, could be coming from our own mind, where our mind is unhappy, existentially unhappy, where it carries misery from the past, self-pity, whatever it is. It's not that there's something happening now. Life or people are being aggressive to you. Sometimes we carry the past. Sometimes, all the time, we carry the past one way or another. It's there. And when we meditate, we learn to face it, deal with it, liberate it. So in general, forbearance as we deal with suffering, and there's a particular aspect of this, is the suffering we impose on ourselves by choosing to follow a Dharma path. We choose to sit and meditate, sometimes without much result, rather than go to the movies or whatever it is. We impose suffering in a way. So we need to look at that. We see, they say, these days, I think a dentist will be the best analogy. we're going back to the Buddhist time. They didn't quite have the same dentists that we have. I remember Akon Rinpoche, who trained as a doctor, telling me about dental work in Tibet before he left. It's mainly extraction. There's not much else. But these days, you're willing to do things. And normally you wouldn't let somebody stick a needle in you. But when they give you those first injections, and then they give you the one that numbs a bit of the gum, so they can give you the really painful one, and then more, you wouldn't normally let people do that to you. And then open wide, and you can't breathe because you're choking, and so on. You don't do that for fun, but you're only too happy to do it for whatever it is, to get a crown, an implant, to get rid of an abscess, a pain, whatever. We're only too happy to do it because it's a long-term benefit for which we're happy with the short-term suffering. That's the key. Short-term suffering brings long-term benefit. So the particular aspect of the second type of forbearance, forbearing suffering, is forbearing the suffering of practicing a Dharma path. Come to that. And then the third aspect is very directly focused on the true nature of mind, on shunyata, and all we need to learn, but may need to practice. Shunyata, blah, 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 shunyata. As if you go around Facebook, I know some of my Facebook friends, there's an awful lot of blah, blah, blah about Dzogchen, shunyata, and it keeps people busy. Interesting chat. The application of shunyata means the destruction of your illusions. That's not easy. That is far from easy. Destruction of your not so good habits, your illusions, the whole way you've structured your thinking to cope with life. Worldly forbearance. That's called upside down forbearance in Dharma terms. It's marvelous that humans develop coping mechanisms. It's wonderful. But they're not long-term coping mechanisms. In Dharma, we have a long-term vision. And so sometimes our coping mechanisms are quite dissimilar from worldly coping mechanisms, if that makes sense. So the whole way we've structured our thinking, the whole story we tell ourselves, about life, is going to have to go as efficiently and as kindly as we can. We need to take loving care of ourselves, but at the same time, we need to be dismantling what is so limiting and what in the long term causes so much suffering. So there we need forbearance. Forbearance becomes a very deep, hands-on skill. It's like learning to drive. You learn to drive and you're quite sort of clumsy at first, and then there's still a lot of thinking and artifice involved, but after a few years of driving, and if you're a good driver, then it is just so fluid and smooth and preemptive and so on. It's so different from when you were learning. So the destruction of our illusions is a training. It's the real training of the second of the 5 stages of the path, the stage of junction or fusion. And we need forbearance. So there are 3 types. And today we're going to focus on the first one, forbearance as remaining unperturbed by harm from others. Just when we were having a chat before the session started, I already mentioned something about this. And Neil was saying that we have many things to forbear all the time, and it's true. But what the scriptures point to so often, and I must say what I've seen in life, in Dharma life, in people's Dharma journey, is what we need to be very careful of, is the anger that can spoil everything. The anger that can, we saw that last time, anger that can destroy lifetimes of Dharma work, for instance. Or in this life, people can be friends for years, and one burst of anger is finished. The real anger, when somebody's really upset, their whole mind changes, the whole way they translate the situation changes. And there can be family bust-ups, couple bust-ups. There can be violence. People can get into prison. Yeah? They can damage, they can kill. So we need to be particularly careful of that, because it will come as a surprise. And the smoother, kinder, more beautiful a Buddhist you become over the years, maybe over the lifetimes, then you may think that the danger of anger is behind you. Then you're really in danger. Because we never know what will provoke the anger. The seeds of anger, they're called in the text, can lie deep within us. And if there's nothing there to trigger them, it's like seeds in the ground. These amazing seeds they find in pyramids, and then 2,000 years nothing happened. Then they put them in the ground and discover what kind of wheat grew in those days there. We have karma from the past. And when it will manifest depends on so many things. But out of the blue, out of nowhere, then circumstances can come. And that's when the danger of an anger that can destroy everything can happen. Now, if it's not too confusing, this becomes particularly a danger on the Vajrayana path with a guru, with an accelerated training in shunyata, in the way I described it before, as the destruction of our illusions. Give it another name, destruction of ego. Ego does not want to be destroyed. Ego survived all this way, hundreds, thousands of lifetimes. Ego is cunning. Ego is very, very powerful. And ego within us can be triggered by all the negative forces and maras and evil influences that are in the world around us. And this is the big, big danger on the Dharma path. So the more accelerated our path is, the faster our illusions can collapse. And sometimes it's too much. And ego is so skillful. It can produce all sorts of experiences. Life-changing experiences which seem authentic, cosmic happenings that take you away from Dharma, make you criticize your teacher, destroy everything you've built up. Unfortunately, I've seen this. I've seen it again and again. So this anger will come to week after next. But it's just to mention it now. We're coming back now to anger that you don't know you've got until it's triggered. When it will be triggered and what will trigger it, we simply don't know. I'll give you an example from my life. I can't say I've not been very angry, but certainly since I started practicing Dharma, in the first couple of years, I was quite angry. But then I had decades of smooth desire. I've got a lot. That was always the main thing to combat. Jealousy, plenty of that. But anger, I was one of these people who's, like it says, not really disturbed by anything. Good person in an emergency, good person in a difficult situation, keep cool, and so on. And then, 30-something years into my Dharma path, my mother-in-law got very unwell, and our life here was changed because we were caring for her. Katia full-time, me half-time, traveling half-time here. And she's a very lovely person. She didn't make me upset, but the fact of her illness doesn't sound like a big thing, but we were 5 years caring for her. Gradually, it made me more and more angry, the situation, for various reasons. That's all private, personal stuff. But I couldn't believe how frustrated, the feelings of anger that I'd not had really for 30, 40 years, all of a sudden was there. And of course, that was then Dharma work to do, as we're going to look at. But I would never have thought that would have been one of the main triggers of an anger, a deep-seated resentment, anger for me. And then, of course, through karma, we don't know what enemies we've got from the past and what will bring them back into our life and which life they'll come back. It's not just depends on us. They've got their own karma. They might not have the karma to be human again for a while, but then when they come back, I used to say something that put a terrible look on people's face in Samiling Shrine Room. I'd say, you know your ex? And people would not your ex, they'll be back. And people sort of look in horror. No. And of course, there's the karma there. I mean, how they'll be back, when they'll be back, how you'll be able to cope with it next time, I hope, fine. But they'll be back. And I think the most vivid example for me is in Buddha's own story with the person who in his enlightenment life as Shakyamuni, as Siddhartha, was his cousin, Devadatta. There was trouble between them, life after life after life. And so there he is, he's Buddha, he's enlightened. And still Devadatta comes back and causes trouble, lots of trouble. Tried to kill him twice, damaged him physically, split his Sangha, and Devadatta took away more than half the Sangha. Not just a little bit, more than half. He's a very charismatic, powerful, very learned person. So we just don't know. This is what we're training for. This is why when we look, I must get into the details of why. So in terms of how do we cope with an aggressor, which is our main training ground, we have two systems of advice. One is from Santideva, we'll look at today, and there we get 9 key ways of training ourselves to think about it, to address it with a different mindset. And then next week, we'll come to the 5 key points that we get from Asanga's tradition. Shantideva Asanga, today Shantideva, who gave us the bodhisattva way, bodhisattva's way of life. Very famous bodhisattva guidebook, manual. So he gives us 9 ways. Should I go through all 9 first? Yeah. First, the fact that the other person is out of control. Second, the fault of one's own karma. Third, the fault of having a body, being embodied. Fourth, the fault of having the mind that we had that got us this body, that made us be reborn in this life. Fifth, how there is no difference between us and them if we retaliate. Sixth, how beneficial these aggressive circumstances could be. Seventh, the enormous kindness of your enemy. Sometimes the bodhisattva teachings say your enemy, as far as Dharma practice is concerned, is your best friend. And sometimes your best friends are your worst enemies. So the enormous kindness of the aggressor. Number 8, funny one, that the Buddhas will be delighted if you react in the right way. They'll be up there. Hooray. Well done, Ken. Great. You did it. And then number 9, we think in general of the great benefit of whatever that circumstance was specifically, how it's helping us to develop this overall mentality where we can go anywhere and deal with anything because we are strong, stable. So the first one is the fact that the aggressor, it says it has no control. And there's a very famous example of this. I'm sure you've seen it. It says, there's several versions of it, but the one we look at says, if somebody hits you with a stick, do you get angry with the stick, normally, or the person? Because it's the stick that actually hurts you. And they hit you with a stick or a rake. But anyway, they hit you with a stick. It's the stick that actually hurts you. But do you get angry with the stick or with the mind and the hand that wielded the stick and hit you? Of course, you're angry at the person. You don't even think about the stick. So it says, why? And we're assuming now circumstances where somebody is being physically aggressive or verbally aggressive. So what is hurting you, making you upset? This is what we're looking at. What is making you disturbed? Lose your mind, be angry, maybe through your anger, wanting to retaliate and so on. What is hurting you is their words or their physical aggression to you. That's like the stick. But we're not angry at the words. so much as at the person. So the person is out of control. And I think outside of Buddhism, there's a lot of psychology talk that makes us familiar with this idea that people who are aggressive, it's very often because of their own history. Very often aggressors have been aggressed themselves, abusers have been abused, and then it's like in the pharmacy here, there's about 5 people who serve, and there's one. If I come back, Katya says, "Did you get her?" I said, "Yeah." Somehow I always get the same one, and she can be really like stone-faced. It's like resentful at having to work, resentful at having to go and do this. Doesn't look happy. There's another one who's really nice, and she really is very, very nice. Never get her. Always get this one. So anyway, I think she has a very unhappy home life. And when we look, why is somebody being aggressive? Why is their mind, their heart disturbed? Their karma, it's so sad. It's terrible that they have a karma and a history. A history is for certain in this life, but maybe for many lives. That's like the hand that wields the stick. And could they do anything other than what they're doing, given all their history? And given the fact of your presence in their life. I'm sorry, I need to tell a joke. I always tell myself I shouldn't do this. It's not too short a joke. I used to travel a lot, and I found it in a copy of Reader's Digest that had been left on an airplane seat. So it's a joke. And if you've heard me say it before, then you can have a little rest. It's about 3 Frenchmen. Let's say Pierre, Jules, et Jacques. 3 young men, happy young men, who very sadly die in a car accident. And they find themselves at the gates of heaven. It's one of those jokes, the pearly gates. And, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, Pierre, Jules, and Jacques, they were Buddhist. They were Buddhists. And young Buddhists die in the car accident. And to their surprise, they're at the pearly gates of heaven. And by the way, this is Ken's version of the Reader's Digest one. It's kind of a bit enhanced. And they think, well, they're French. Merde! Because they were Buddhist. They expected the Bardo reincarnation and all of that. And they look at each other, what are we going to do? And there's St. Peter at the pearly gates. He says, cool, guys, cool. It's okay. We know you were Buddhists, but, you were Buddhists, but you weren't bad people. Basically, you've not done anything too bad. So welcome to heaven. And they look at each other. Wow. Whew, that was a close one. So he says, it's lovely here, and you can do what you want. You're here for forever. Huh? So just enjoy yourselves. There's just one thing. The ducks. The ducks? And they look around, they can see that actually there are quite a lot of ducks. They say, yeah, it's God. He has this thing with ducks. So whatever you do, because there are lots of them, never tread on a duck. Yeah, sure, okay. Never tread on a duck. So they're there, and they find it's wonderful. It's just everything more than they could ever dreamt of. They have a great time. But after 3 months, Pierre, in a moment of because they're trying to be mindful. See, they were Buddhists, so they're trying to be mindful and not stead on the duck, mindful walking, all of that. But they got a bit too used to being in heaven. So Pierre steps on a duck. All of a sudden, the whole sky, the heavens turn dark, and hundreds of fiery angels come descending down with a very, very, very angry old woman. And they chain Pierre to the angry old woman, and she starts criticizing him and telling him, and they say, now you'll be together for the rest of time. So then Jules and Jacques, they realize this duck thing's serious. It's very serious. So their mindfulness practice gets an upgrade immediately. And they're fine, they're enjoying heaven. And from time to time they come back and see Pierre, but he's living in misery. But after 6 months, Jules, in a moment of mindfulness, steps on the duck. The heavens turn fiery again. Same thing happens. Band of fiery angels, wrathful angels come down, and they chain. This time they've got a very, very miserable lady, and they chain them together, and they say, now you're together forever. And she starts moaning, and she starts moaning about this and complaining about that. And so they just leave Jacques. Jacques' mindfulness, exemplary. After that, exemplary. So he manages to go a whole year, when all of a sudden, the heavens turn dark. No, the heavens light up. Or a whole load of angels come from the heavens with the most beautiful young lady. And she's got such a kind face. And everything that Jacques could ever have dreamt of. And they chain them together, and they say, now you're together for the rest of time. And Jacques looks at her, and she looks at him kindly in the eyes. He thinks, gosh, so nice. And he starts crying. It's so nice. And he says, I don't know what I've done to deserve this. Heaven's great, but I never thought it could be this good. And she says, I don't know, darling. All I know is that I trod on a duck. Sorry, it's a long story. But it's to make the point, we've got our karma with other people in our lives, but it's also their karma to have us in their lives. So coming back to this story, then at one point, someone can turn up, and goodness knows how, the details, the circumstances, but they have karma with you. That's the hand wielding the stick. Whatever you did to them in their past life, this comes in the next point, but it's their karma to be your aggressor. It's like the other way around with the duck story. So we think about this a lot, our own circumstances and the other person who's aggressing us, their mind. And like it said, the essential character of forbearance is to be unperturbed, because our mind dwells solely in compassion. So what we have to learn, if there are aggressive circumstances, is to not have the heart that gets inflamed and gets angry and criticizes and blames, which is an essential part of anger. The process of anger usually involves blame. That person is wrong. They shouldn't do that. I'm right, they're wrong, but at least they're wrong, and so on. And to understand the history, the power behind it, and in particular, the power behind it in relation to you. So we think about that a lot, and we try to develop compassion. All of these points are for you to take away and think about and to work with, because our worldly habit will want to tell us again and again, yes, but they are wrong. They shouldn't be doing that, and so on and so on. So, as I said last time, it's very important. We don't get angry, but that doesn't mean that you don't do anything. If there are aggressive circumstances, if your partner is aggressive, somebody in your family is aggressive, somebody in the workplace is aggressive, then it doesn't mean, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I'm practicing forbearance, I have to accept this. No, we can work out what to do for the best. Sometimes we can get out of the situation. Sometimes we can say something, do something that will make things better. Sometimes we can report somebody, call the police, do what needs to be done. But the point is that as a bodhisattva, we do that from a place of compassion and serenity and strength. Through our refuge, through our bodhicitta, through all of the rest of our practice. So it doesn't mean we just accept. It means that compassion, and we are training not to be upset, not to be angry. A lot to think about there. So the second point is we consider karma, the power of karma. Now this is huge. To consider karma, first you have to understand karma. None of us do. Only Buddha understands karma 100%. That's what the scriptures say. And only great bodhisattvas really understand the past lives that led to this life's happenings. Where we were with that person in past lives, what happened. Usually we don't know at all, anything, can't remember. So we don't understand karma, but we need to learn as much as we can, and we need to observe life and observe ourselves. And over the years, you'll find, I call it the smell of karma. There's a situation and it reeks of karma, especially your karma, especially the same thing again and again. You tried hard, you made money, but you lost it again. You tried hard with a relationship. It messed up again, and bit by bit, we start to feel the karma we carry. In the people we know very well, we start to see the karma they carry, whether they're aware of it or not. It's got a kind of a certain smell, and before things happen, you know, they're not going to be able to do that, or they are going to be able to do that, or they're going to fall in love again. And as soon as that person turns up, you know, like this. Reeks of karma. I can't quite tell you what the smell's like rotten fish or burnt rubber or whatever, but there's a feel, a reek of karma. So, and here it says the fault of your own karma. Normally, through anger, we blame somebody else. It's his fault, her fault, because they are aggressive towards me. I didn't start this. Well, maybe not in this life, but maybe you started it in the past life. And what goes around comes around, and now it's coming back. Now, this is a sensitive topic. It's a topic you need to think about. Ken can't tell you about it. You have to come to your own conclusion, because there's all this thing called spiritual bypassing that I mentioned last time, where they say people, and what is spiritual bypassing? It's a psychological term. It was invented, I forget how many decades ago, not just for Buddhists, for any people who use a religious argument to avoid facing the issues that they really ought to face. This is in psychological terms. And there's good spiritual bypassing and bad spiritual bypassing, I think, in psychology. I'm sure some of you must know psychology much better than I do, so you can correct me afterwards. But the good spiritual bypassing is short term, when you can alleviate a very dangerous, I suppose, difficult situation by telling yourself religious stories, whatever it is, Christian, Buddhist, whatever it is. You put yourself in a mindset which makes it easier for you. So in psychology, that's perhaps the useful spiritual bypassing, use of religion to deal with your problems. But then the bad point is when we use religious notions, and that stops us dealing with somebody, dealing with a situation, dealing with something in ourselves, that we are involved in that way. And from a psychological point of view, that's the issue that in the long term ought to be being dealt with, but it's not being dealt with because our spiritual notions are standing in the way. Now, this is a whole area, and on social media these days, people take different stances in terms of Buddhism. And this idea, it's my karma, it's his karma, it's her karma. And they say it's a way of avoidance, could be a way of avoidance. And we have to make our own minds up about this and try and really understand the Buddha's teaching, Shantideva's teaching, and to see if it is valuable, helpful in the long term for us. This idea, this is because of karma. So like I say, the same thing. These ideas don't stop us from doing something about the situation, about the person. Not at all. We are here to reduce the suffering in the world, our own suffering, the suffering that's caused by ongoing situations. But we are learning to do it not from a place of upset and anger, but we're trying to find a place of strength, serenity, love and compassion. So the first aspect of love is to understand how the other person is controlled by their history. The second aspect is to, on this side, I have the karma for this. Of course you do. Couldn't bloody well, I'm swearing, you see, couldn't bloody well happen to you if you didn't have the karma for it. It'd be happening to somebody else. Of course it's your karma. But then, this is why we need to understand karma. Karma does not mean predestination. It doesn't mean, oh well, karma, there's nothing to be done. There's everything to be done. Santideva makes this point. He's made it in a few talks I've heard recently. That karma is what happened up until now. For the rest of the story, it depends on what we do now, how we handle the present, how the future will be. And there's infinite scope for change. It doesn't mean, oh, well, tough luck. This is how it is. I just have to accept it. I remember in 1989, I think it was, I organized an interfaith. It wasn't my idea. It was Akon Rinpoche's idea, but I organized it. High-level meeting of top religious people in Samiling. Not the usual sort of interfaith thing where people just stand up and say nice things. The scholars and the dignitaries were to meet in private to discuss one topic over several days to really go in depth, because it was often found that interfaith never got into depth. And so we have one year and another one the next year. I forget which one it was. But there was a Hindu scholar, Mr. Sharma, Dr. Sharma, very lovely man. And he was debating, let's say, arguing with Taisitupa, who was the Buddhist representative, about karma. And Taisitupa was making the point that in the present, although we have the karma that made this happen now, of course, karma means cause and effect. It couldn't have happened without causes that made it happen. But that we have choice, we have willpower, if you like to use that word, or choice, and we can change the future. And I remember Dr. Sharma, he said, you think you have choice, but you have no choice. If there is this and this, because of all your history, you're going to choose this. You think you are choosing, but you are not choosing. There is no choice. It is all written. And Taisitupa disagreed. There was no conclusion, but it was a very interesting argument. And it was fun for Taisitupa because he's such a high up person that nobody criticizes him. Nobody challenges him normally in what he says. He's the authority. But in this situation, there was somebody who's also an authority and who came from a different kind of history. So that was quite fun to see. And it was, each time each one of them spoke, it was very convincing. It was a real debate. It was, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. So anyway, what you have to do, what I can't tell you, is learn more and more and more about karma and come to your own conclusions. So anyway, we think of the fault of our own karma, and we think about karma and the difference with predestination, and that this aggression couldn't have happened if we didn't have the karma. And we see each person's karma so different, so different. The third thing is, and now we're looking at actual physical aggression, is the fault of having a body. There are many, many forms of rebirth. Just now we're in these human bodies. Once you've got a human body, then you can catch diseases. You're in a world where there are wars, where there is conflict, where things happen unexpectedly. That's the very nature of human existence. It's the body that hurts if you're being beaten, and it's because you've got ears that you can hear what people are saying, and you've got a programmed brain that can interpret it. If somebody says something horrible to you in the most foul language and criticizing you in a language you don't understand, like if I said to you, just somebody making noises. And if in your own language, I tell you that you are the whatever, then you understand those sounds. Your ears hear it. Your brain interprets it and interprets it in terms of all the historical memories it carries. So we live in this vulnerable unit. That's because of our own past and history. So that's something to think about. You know, it's like my sister-in-law, she years and years ago, she bought herself a Lada car. This is in the 1980s, Russian car. Because she said, if anyone bumps into me, this is the strongest one. And you know, I'm going to survive. And then some cars, they're so flimsy. You think, gosh, if I'm in an accident in that, you're done for. We live in this vulnerable thing. Sounds, words, actions. The weather, so much is uncomfortable, painful for us. So we think about that. We think about being born with a bodhisattva's mind and no body, just a mental body. We think about the Deva realms where they don't have aggression and so on. Fault of our physical existence, and then number 4, the fault of the mind is very similar. It's the mind that you've cultivated over lifetimes, that in the bardo before this life got you this particular body, made you born in this place with those parents, in that country, in that whole movie that's been your life. That's because of all we did with our mind in our past lives. And we carry that through. What we're doing with our mind now is going to, how we react to other people is going to make our circumstances in the next life and lives afterwards. We think about these things. And every time we think about them, we realize it's so beautiful, it's so meaningful, it's so necessary to have this mind of forbearance, the bodhisattva heart, where we can cope with anything. And somebody says those foul things to you, it's the same as listening to beautiful music. It's sound. It's sound that can make you a bodhisattva. They're telling you what a creep you are. They're telling you your worst thoughts. So wonderful. Wonderful. This is how my mind can become stronger. Whereas before it was so vulnerable. Somebody says this one word and you're gone. You're defeated. You're devastated. Now bring it on. Say it 100 times. So, and then number 5, we're looking at retaliation. If it's physical retaliation, verbal retaliation, if we fight back, if we blamed them in the first place, they were wrong to do this. If you fight back, then you've done the same thing. Whatever, so I mean, general in samsara, there'll be aggressive people, there'll be nasty people, there'll be people who come through your karma and make life difficult for you. So then, are we going to be pulled down to their level and do the same as them? Are we going to lose our noble heart to engage in non-noble action because somebody else is doing it? I saw something, I forget quite, on social media, it says, anger is the way we punish ourselves for somebody else's fault. Anger is the way we punish ourselves for somebody else's fault. It's very true. So if we descend into retaliation, and of course there's the story of Akon Rinpoche's death. He was stabbed more than 50 times. And he told his companions and he himself, we don't retaliate. And what I wanted to read to you, and I'll bring it next time because it was just amazing. I stumbled across it, a recording of him in 1992. And after Tibetan New Year, we have the Nyungne practice, 8 pairs of Nyungne, 2-day practice. And he asked me to give some teachings in there. And at one point I asked him if he'd come in and give some teachings. He gave some. And he more or less described what happened to him 1992, 21 years later. He said, if somebody is killing you, how do you feel? And then he described it, and I'll bring it to you because I don't want to, I can say, spoil the effect of the text. But it's about not retaliating, but having nothing but love and compassion, pity for the people, praying for them. At the same time, he says, if they are stabbing you or hurting you, then you think this is nothing, because at least I will die once and it's over. In the hell realms, people die and then they're resuscitated, and they die again and they're resuscitated. So as this is happening, you can feel such compassion for those in the hell realms and so on. He's describing how a bodhisattva would react. And then in 2013, this happened to him, and he actually lived it. He actually did it. So of course he died. The world lost him as a person, but his mind was anyway so good, but the benefit for his karma, just amazing. So we think that there's no difference of fault if we descend into retaliation. 6th point is then we think how beneficial this could be. So when there is aggression, we are happy for it because we need to train in dealing with little things so that we, it's like little weights. You need to start lifting little weights, and then you can lift stronger weights, and you can lift really big weights. If we can deal with little bits of nastiness, little bits of aggression, little bits of difficulty, and find the bodhisattva mind, the smooth, strong, pure, compassionate heart, caring for the other person, understanding what's going on and so on, then gradually we can build up this strength so that when life is difficult, then we are trained, better and better trained. So such benefit, because without forbearance, we will never get enlightened. And if we have no forbearance, at one point, terrible anger can destroy everything or turn us into future devadatas, which we don't want. So beneficial. And because of that, then we have point 7, which is a total turnaround of mentality. We think, how kind the aggressor. Because I'm a lovely bodhisattva, I don't get much opportunity to practice forbearance. Life's great. People are nice to me. So, how wonderful this opportunity to deal with this atom bomb that's waiting there inside to explode. How wonderful that that's there. How kind. You're the kindest person in the world. Really, Santideva says that. Your aggressor is the kindest person in the world to you. We really think like that. Or let's say we train and we learn how to think like that, because it's not easy. It's not easy. Number 8 is in a similar vein. It's how the Buddhas will be delighted. Now, if you know anything about Buddhas, their main point is equanimity. So they're not kind of They don't get the blues when they see all the suffering in the world, nor the people who are getting angry. And it's not as though they're having a good day because they saw Ken being forbearing. Their mind is so wonderful, but we don't actually experience their mind as it really is. With Buddhas who manifest to us as our gurus and teachers, we see their manifestation. And especially when we have a guru and we're doing guru yoga training and so on, learning how to really be with a guru to benefit, then when, how can you say, the way they deal with us and look at us is stern, remote, cold. That's our thermometer to know that our practice, our life isn't along the lines of Dharma. And when there's a flow and there's a complicity and a much more positive feeling that flows between you, then that's our way of knowing that we are on the right track. So it says the Buddhas will be delighted. And it's a helpful, how can you say, can't call it a mind trick, but it's a helpful way of thinking. It's like, whereas before somebody upset you, and then for the first time, you're not going to push my buttons anymore. So what? So what? So people, they're kind of waiting for you to react, and then all of a sudden you don't. So we can think there's a Buddha up there. There's Tara going, yeah, you did it. You made it. You didn't respond to all the button pushing. You're free. You're free from that vulnerability. It's amazing. So we think the Buddhas will be delighted. And in general, the great benefit is that we need forbearance. We train with obvious, difficult people, difficult circumstances. And then that will help us when we come to deal, as we see, with second and third areas of forbearance to do with facing suffering itself and the journey to shunyata. So I think they're the main things. They're the 9 keys from Shantideva's teaching. It's a multifaceted approach. We can apply any one of those. We can, depending on the circumstances, train specifically in one of those. But in the end, they all, like you say, come together as a package. Yeah, I think that's it. So I was thinking of something quite funny in a way. There's sometimes in life, I mean, when, I'm a Buddhist teacher, okay, I'm not a fantastic Buddhist teacher, but I'm nevertheless a Buddhist teacher. And sometimes when you teach something, or you have to teach something, how can you say? Life is tuned to that note. Once, a long time ago, I used to go a couple of times a year to our Barcelona center to give courses. And we had a retreat, a weekend retreat, a beautiful place called Montserrat. Maybe you know it, Montserrat Mountains. It's a Christian sacred place. So there are many Christian buildings where people go to retreat, and they had one out for our Buddhist retreat. And so we were there, got there Friday, arrived Friday night, nice atmosphere, we get installed. The next house, they had a Christian retreat, so they're all, and it was nice spring, summer. So they're all outside with the guitar doing Guantanamera, la la la, Guantanamera, and getting ready. So there's that kind of atmosphere, and I thought, no, my topic was impermanence. impermanence and suffering. The next day, Christians in the next house had to leave because Montserrat is very amazing rocks and mountains, and people who've been mountain climbing had an accident. 3 people died, and so the house next door became I forget what they call it. It's the place where they put the bodies, and the relatives have to come. And so all of a sudden, our weekend on impermanence and suffering was like in a very charged up atmosphere. I remember once in Sameling Shrine Room, was giving a teaching on impermanence, the death aspect of impermanence. One of our older members who had severe asthma, he started having an attack and was getting out an inhaler, and then the inhaler again, and then the inhaler again, and too much inhaler. And then all of a sudden we had this collapsed person on the floor, and makes it very vivid. So I was thinking about sometimes when that's happened. I think these last 3 months for me, 3-4 months, been the most difficult in my life. And here I am having to talk about forbearance. It's quite amusing. So anyway, let's dedicate. And if you want to dedicate, beside what we mean with through the prayers, for anyone in your life who has a difficulty at the moment, and please do, please, whatever was good and positive and helpful, let's dedicate it to everybody. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained. Through the main enemy, our mind's defilements being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen, and may its development know no setbacks. May it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. So, thank you. And over to you. If you've got any comments you'd like to add, or any questions.
Just wanted to say that I think there are situations when you are patient for so long, like long, and there is a point when just you lose it. And then you realize that you can't change the situation, you can't change the person. All you can do to keep your peace, you have to get out a bit, and then you can come back again. But sometimes it's impossible to deal with it because the person is not on the level that, like a person with learning disability, just you can't change the mindset. You have to accept, and you are not a saint, you can't keep patient forever. I think it's impossible for 24 hours, 7 days. So you have to know how can you find 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and then to get your patience back. I don't know if anybody else had similar situation, carers, all know it, that there are times that's it, you can't help.
Mm.
Maybe you felt the same as well. Yeah, but
yeah, I think it's very true. This is, why we try and deal with things from a place of peace and compassion and love. But it's also why this paramita, patience, forbearance, is very, very much linked with diligence, which is the next one. Because in diligence, we learn about what's called intelligent rest. Because sometimes the idea of diligence, people think it means you just carry on, it means constant work, never stopping. But the teachings, bodhisattva teachings, are that sometimes it's vital to stop. We need to know when to stop, how to rest, so that we can cope. And I very much appreciate what you say. It's the voice of experience, and I think it's very true.
Can I have a comment? There may be a question at the end. I take the point that forbearance allows us to hold our center, or hold ourselves together, I suppose, in such a way that hopefully eventually we can be wise and make wise choices. I get that. My reflection is, in the world, it seems as though latterly, in recent years, the world's becoming a less and less forbearing place. But I was just noticing more than that, not only are folk, I'm not going to name names or anything, but not only is there's general trend to be less forbearing, but folk are taking decisions based on that lack of forbearance that seem to be taking this culture, the global culture, in a negative direction.
Angus, sometimes when you read the press, see it on social media or whatever, anger's more like a quality. It talks about these people are angry, upset about this, and express their anger. And yeah, I agree. Very hard to know. I mean, the world's, it's a big place. And what we see on the news is very much what the news people want us to see, and for all sorts of reasons, because it's spectacular, because they need to keep people on screen for the advertising, all sorts of reasons. Blood, death, destruction, anger, war. It's complicated. I can remember Che used to laugh because Chinese newspapers is nothing but good news. It's only this was achieved, this was accomplished, this is wonderful, and that's just as bad as well because it's propaganda. But the world is a big place. You just go out in the real world and you walk for 2 kilometers and talk to people and meet people. And there are thousands, millions, billions of those people, and what we see in the media is sort of very limited take on that. But if we use that as a yardstick, then it does seem to be the case. And it's certainly what Guru Rinpoche predicted, is that the coarse emotions, greed, the unhealthy side of sexuality, anger, and so on, would just get more and more in this world. And it's generally on the way down at the moment for the next few 100,000 years.
That's, I don't wish to be too negative here, but within conversation with younger generations, let's say, even, so I'm not talking about the despots of the world, we've always had despots, but now there seems to be such a growing lack of forbearance amongst, let's say, younger age groups than us. for me, perhaps. And it's quite disheartening, actually.
I think media have got a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Media works on it changes so fast. It's all to do with attention spans. You look at movies, you know, the frame changes every 4 or 5 seconds, and the way things are presented on TV and other places, it needs to be quick, it needs to be short, and a whole person like me feels incredibly slow.
That's more work to do.
Yeah, but then, I mean, very often my teachers, going back a while now, they'd say, when they're talking about the dark ages coming and Guru Rinpoche's predictions, they say, yeah, but okay, that's the general trend, but then we can be little islands of a golden age, and we can be on the way up, and the people we're with can be on the way up, and you know, we're not bound to this world. We're going to die. When we get reborn, there are many, many other thousands, millions of other worlds that will correspond to our own mind. So our job is to be positive, be strong, be golden, be light, all those things it says in the bodhisattva prayer and prayers. And then in a community like we are here, and then this is a golden age. We're on the way up, we're on the way out.
I like that, being islands of gold. I'll take that.
Or even better than
Hello, Ken.
flowers. Hello.
Bonjour. I'm in Japan.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, in my experience, forbearance, I had a bad relationship at one point, like domestic violence, and I was a single mom, and that man was just so jealous of even like the grandmother sending us apple juice or things like that, and I felt that karma connection that I was working it through, and actually forgave him, and now we're okay. We're not friends, but it's okay. It's no problem, you know, if I see him. But I think the forbearance, it brings the forgiveness, being able to forgive, to light. You know, we can say, "Oh, I forgive you," and in a kind of an easy way. I'm sorry, kind of thing. But forgiving the person, but also ourselves for, was it my karma to go through that, or his karma, or if it was both our karma, and also the kids involved and stuff. But the forgiveness was kind of the light at the end of the tunnel of really understanding what is forgiveness. And it's, yeah, so what you were saying, that's your best friend or your best teacher, or a really lucky situation. I understand that. Good.
Yeah, because if you can work with one situation or a couple of situations, you can get the general message, because we realize what a load we carry with us day after day, hour after hour, year after year. And with forgiveness, it's like at last we've put that load down. And it's a wonderful thing. Then we realize, we got other baggage beside this one. And we can really travel light. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Can I ask you, because I heard so many domestic violence cases, that what I heard that when you forgive, it just, the aggressor just using it and then coming back and back again. How could you find a solution that you are friends now? It's amazing.
It's to leave the situation, and you leave it for a long time. A counselor said you have to give it like 3 months, many months, if not years. And if the person who's involved wants to change that part of him, well, in my case, I can only speak for my case, and realize that he had this violent tendency, and he had to learn how to walk away from when those emotions came up. And so he had his own way to do it. And then it became a respect kind of thing. Both people have to work on it. to forgive, and then the other person uses that as a ploy. That also I experienced as well, and you got walked on over again, and you think everything's going to be fine, and then it comes again. But sometimes you have to walk away, take yourself away from the dangerous situation, and that's an advice you need to give if you're counseling people, is to sometimes you need that space, and whether it's meant to work itself out, it can, but both have to work at it. Yeah.
I never ever heard that somebody was able to do it. Wow, that you actually helped the aggressor. And
yeah, and sometimes when I see, he's a musician, so sometimes I see him and he's selling coffee and sometimes we play music together, and he always says, "I'm so sorry for that time." And I was, you don't have to say sorry anymore. Look, we're having coffee and your life is going. He has a new girlfriend and things like that. Like life went on, But I had a lot of trauma, and my kids have a lot of they work through things that they still haven't. It's because they were small. So but instead of holding it to him, I just send love, and to my kids, and the metta kind of compassion. And that everyone involved was that's just what Ken was saying. The people who you meet and the people who meet you, is that there's a relationship there. So when that's being realized, then you can kind of take away. You don't invest your emotional ups and downs in it. You can move away from it. Yeah, but it takes a real commitment in the heart to be able to forgive. Yeah, and I think in all the religions they talk about that, not just Buddhism, Christian, everything, and native. Yeah.
And I guess you really have to feel that you want to help the person, like whatever he did to you.
Yes.
Like you really feel
yes. You have to wish happiness for that person, for sure, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. It's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I can say from when people used to come to Akon Rinpoche with couple problems, family problems, there is no one advice. There's no bodhisattvas have to do this. The circumstances are always so unique. So sometimes, like in couples, Rinpoche would counsel people. He's saying you need to get out, and sometimes that will be very hard, because sometimes, even though things are terrible, to break away from somebody can be almost, it feels impossible, and without that little bit of help and
financial
encouragement,
things.
Without that encouragement from somebody who's your counselor or advisor, then you just can't make the move to break up a relationship. Other people, he would say, hang on in there, and this is your path, this is your practice, stay in the situation, do this, do that. And I think from my point of view, I need to say there is no simple black and white rule. Bodhisattvas always need to like leave or stay or do this or do that. It has to be tailor-made and with a longer term view of benefit for yourself and the other person.
Oh yes, that's right. That's
but it does really, like Marie's story, people can be friends afterwards. I've seen few cases of that. But not always.
Such a advanced karma you have, that you were able to deal with it. Like, most of us can't deal with it.
I came to the realization that the violence, or the happening that happened, we were working each other's own karma out, so that if in this lifetime it could somehow resolve in some way, that it would become a better thing. And his life improved, and he went through more hardships. He had like women who attacked him and lots of different things, and but yeah, and he says that to me, you taught me something very deep. So that's why I can maintain this kind of, friendship or kind of, it's okay, yeah. But you really have to see the long picture. Yeah, it's hard, very hard.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Then...
Hi, Ken. If I can add one thing, please.
Yeah, are you wanting to say something? Are you waving goodbye or waving you'd like to,
No,
as a message? Okay. Discussion. Yeah. Whoops. I have to look at the discussion. Yeah. Difference between self-defense and retaliation. Right, I got it. Why not prevent a crime performed to oneself and prevent bad karma to the perpetrator and everyone around? The story of the Buddha as a captain. Yeah, that's a good question. I think what we're talking about here is not so much what you do as the mind that's behind it. I really believe that. I'm not saying that to get out of answering the question. I really mean it, because I'm thinking again of Abkon Rinpoche when he was murdered, because there were 3 aggressors, one main one, and there was Akon Rinpoche with his 2 companions, and they were big, strong people, his companions. So they could have, I don't know, they could have defended themselves, which would have meant fighting, wrestling to get the swords away from the other people. Big knives, they're sort of Tibetan swords, then they're big knives, very big knives, or very short swords. But he said not to. But then he was him, and these were people committed to a bodhisattva path. He would have had his own reasons that suited him as as a bodhisattva. For people who are not like him, then maybe it's better to defend oneself. Retaliation is when, I think the difference is, self-defense, you want to limit the damage. Retaliation is there's a definite intention to hurt the other person. Let's take a more simple thing than somebody with a sword, just a verbal exchange. Sometimes we want to hurt the other person. We want to find the weak point. That's not the bodhisattva mind. And if it's physical aggression, then the bodhisattva thing isn't just to let it happen. It's to make the least suffering possible, whether that's run away, a self-defense, whether one blow and knock the other person out can save. I don't know. I think it depends on the circumstances. I don't have a straight answer. But what we're talking about here, the main point I'm very clear about, is that over your life and over all the aggressive situations they can be, verbal or physical, what we're aiming for ourselves is this bodhisattva mentality that's being sketched out here. And the main thing is our mind is learning not to be upset in itself and never to wish harm on the other person. They are the key points, and part of that, the earlier parts, were about trying to understand, where does this situation come from? It comes from them being out of control because they're the victims of their history and their karma, and we've got this happening to us because we have our karma. By applying that and by trying to have as calm a mind as possible, we're on the right track. I think that's the key point. Okay. maybe we're finished for today then. And so thank you all very, very much, and see you next week where we carry on thinking about these things. Lots of love to you all. Bye-bye now.
So very much, Ken. Thanks, everyone.
And
Try now.
Bye.
much. Bless you.